Jason Klamm, and this is Comedy on Vinyl. The year is 1960, the album 2,000 Years with Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks, the artists. Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. My guest this week is oh my God. Okay, here's how my brain is fried. I wrote guest, Corey Ryan Forrester, and I just almost said my guest this week is guest, Corey Ryan Forrester. So, Jesus Christ, thanks for being here.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Holy crap.
Listen, you got my name right. That's way more than so many people do, so I don't give a shit if you fumble over it.
What do they... Can I ask what they normally say? Because people fuck my name up all the time. So
it's not. There's not a norm. I mean, Cody a lot, and then they'll just Foster is the last name, even though it's not. Foster's a completely different name. And I have had one time someone called me, and this had to be a rib. This had to be on purpose, but it was a booker. It was Cody Ron Foster. All three names completely wrong. And then and it got to be where it happened so much that I'm like, clearly. It's me, like it's my name. It's like it happens all the time. It doesn't happen to the other two dudes that I'm touring with. But then it was on we did a weekend. We did a couple shows at the Wilbur Theater in Boston. We sold it out, and that was a really big deal for us. Like we graduated to theater, sold out this, and we get there, and I'm so excited. I'm running down the street to see my name on the marquee, and it's Carrie Forrester, and I'm like, you're not even. Why are you going off memory? Like our name is on the ticket. Like just. We put the letter, and the guys will say that I had a diva moment. I didn't have a diva moment. I just went in there and explained that I didn't go to college, and this is as close as I've ever had to a graduation. And could you please put an O where the A is? That's it. That's all I wanted. I need to see that.
Yeah. Well, like I get it. People think my last name is Klamm all the time, and what complicates it further is that most people who have my last name pronounce it Klamm.
Oh, really?
My wing of the family is the only ones who goes with the original German, which is Klamm.
Klamm.
And the problem is it means moist. So it's not an exciting name. It's
like
not
a clam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, I think it might be the origin of that. It's fucking... So what are you going to do?
Yeah,
but still,
what are you going to do?
Put the man's name on the marquee. Get it right. You picked 2,000 Years with Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. And for those who cannot see the video that I will probably try and put out on Patreon, you have a Blazing Saddles background. So I'm assuming Mel Brooks is a big part of your life.
Mel Brooks is a very big part of my life. Blazing Saddles is pretty much, I'm one of those dudes who, when someone asks, like, hey, name your top 5, almost anything, I always like lead with, okay, I'll give you my top 5 movies, pastas, cereals, but like you have to understand, if you ask me tomorrow, there's a good chance that 2 of these are going to be replaced with something else, because I'm a very moody person. I'm one of those types of people that when I go on vacation, if I go on vacation for 3 days, I pack like 9 things to wear because I don't know if I'm going to want to wear this or this or this, what I'm feeling. But Blazing Saddles consistently it's number 1 favorite movie of all time. Always has been, probably always will be. I got introduced to it when I was a kid because it was my dad's, like one of his favorite movies. And it was a big bonding moment for us. And he's told me in later years that like, that was a big moment for him because he was kind of worried, like, oh my God, if my son doesn't like this movie, I have no son, you know? And I did. And as a kid, like, it'd probably be disingenuous to say that it was mostly like, you know, the fart scene and just how goofy they were. And then I get older and I'm like, oh my God, this is so ahead of its time. It's crazy. And so, yeah, Mel Brooks and his oeuvre, as it were, it's like Mel Brooks, Bugs Bunny, Jerry Seinfeld, Tim Wilson. That's my Mount Rushmore of comedic influences.
Like the Bugs Bunny is up there. That's you know what, you're
for
honest.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's one of those movies that I feel like I saw it at just the right time where it was not. Where my parents waited because they're like, we're not going to have a movie filled with that word and then not having understand what irony is. So they gave it a bit because, and so it hit me at just the right moment. I was like 15 or 16. I was just like, oh, this is beauty.
Well, I'm from Marjorie Taylor Greene's district here in North Georgia, so I'd actually heard that word more in the day leading up to seeing that movie than was in the movie. So what does it matter? It may as well have funniness to it. You know what I mean?
Right. And at least it's said for a reason, you know.
Yeah, and by a black person sometimes.
Yeah, thank goodness. When do you have a history with this record, or is this something you picked because you like Mel Brooks?
I have a history with this record in terms of I like it. I love the 2,000-Year-Old Man as a character, and I just yeah, if I ever get to choose, like, hey, we're going to talk about comedy, what do you want to talk about? I'm going to try to, if it was a hey comedy movie, I would have picked Blazing Saddles. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I always want, if I leave any sort of footprint out there in the world, I need people to know that Mel Brooks was the guy, and
Mm-hmm.
podcasts are forever. So I want his, not that, oh, if we didn't talk about Mel Brooks, Lord, he would be lost to the annals of time. But I just love Mel Brooks, and any opportunity to talk about him, I'll take it.
That's absolutely fair. Do you know when you first heard of or heard the 2,000-Year-Old Man in any iteration? There are a million of these records, by the way, so we could have picked any of them, but
Right. Probably. I I wouldn't have been a very, very young kid, because when I was a kid, Mel Brooks was very much just Blazing Saddles, Robin Hood Men in Tights, that guy. And then I get older and I start studying about him. I was probably a teenager because I really started studying up on comedy. I started doing stand up at 16, and I'm like, I gotta know everything about it. Oh my God, Mel Brooks didn't just do movies; he had an act with this guy named Carl Reiner. That's Rob Reiner's dad. Oh my God. So I would have been young, but really truly listening to it and appreciating it. I think like the first time I've heard it on vinyl, for the record, and it was at the Vermont Comedy Club, where in the green room they have a bunch of old comedy records and stuff. And I
that's
would have listened
amazing.
to it. Yeah, and it's great. You just sit back there and play them, get drunk, and I definitely would have listened to it then. And probably in it and listening to it today for this show, I was like, God, it holds up so well. Like Mel Brooks, that's one of the best things about Mel Brooks is kind of, as comedy tends to, even the good stuff, sometimes age like bread,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't really.
No, no. There's stuff in this where I couldn't remember. I never know when I dig back, because even going back, we've been doing this show 10 years now. Going back, I'm like, oh, I would never have said that about that record. Oh, I would have, something else would have popped out about this bit or that bit. But this feels pretty solid every time I've listened to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a couple references to like famous people of the time that I'm like, maybe I heard that name, but that just doesn't carry the weight that I'm sure it did with that audience. But
Yeah.
like aside from that, like, I mean, I don't know. It's just quality stuff, man. It's really good.
And it's got, and I apologize because any of my observations are very likely stuff that feels new to me, but I probably said 10 times because we've talked about it before in the show. But I mean, every time I re-listen to it, I hear new, as an improviser, I hear bits and pieces of where Carl Reiner's brain is going, because I know that these were bits that they had planned out and worked out before, but they're clearly not word for word. That's
Of course.
partially what I love about it, is that it's very much up to their whims on the night. It's got that energy that I don't think a lot of acts had at the time, because there wasn't a ton of improv on stage.
Yeah, there are those moments where I mean, as an improviser, you can tell, and I've done a little improv, but I'm mostly a stand-up comedian. But even in that, there's some improv. But like the best improv can be in that setting is like, all right, we know the material, but let's not be married to it. So we've got these. It's like bowling with the gutters. Just fucking throw it down there, and it's gonna bounce off of something. And if you made a bad throw, we're gonna get there. Like we know where we can come back to. Because like when I'm writing bits, that's how I am. Like on stage, I'm like, I got the punchline, and I know it's good because I did it last night and it's good. So we can kind of shimmy a little bit, and if we start to kind of lose it, boom, we got that. And you can hear that in these guys. Where there was a couple times where it sounded to me like Mel was like, all right, we know what we're doing. Let me have a little fun here and give Carl something maybe he didn't know I was going to give him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially a couple times too. Where's the one that I wrote down? In there, we can flip all over the place if we want, but there's a bit where they go into a coffee house. The whole second half of the record is in a coffee house, and it's just an excuse for Mel Brooks to do characters. And Carl Reiner's interviewing him as an actor, and at some point he says, I made a mistake. You're not an actor, are you? I don't know what's going on there, but clearly it's like, did I remember correctly? Or
I know that was a moment in the record that I really, really wanted to be in the audience. I wanted to see like what all it was that like triggered him to stop yes-anding for a second and be like, hold on, what are we doing?
And he, again, notoriously, obviously he's the straight man because you can't not be in a room with Mel Brooks. Can you imagine having the energy and like ability to keep up with Mel Brooks as a straight man? I don't know that I could do it.
Dude, let me tell you something. And this was Mel Brooks in his prime. When I hung out with Mel Brooks, I got to spend my 31st birthday with him.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I'll never beat that. Like,
No.
that's it. His son Max and I are friends, and I got invited over there for dinner. And this is the first night I meet Max, for the record. We were at Bill Maher's, like one of his rap parties or whatever. They found out I was in town. I was staying at an Airbnb, didn't have anywhere to be and my birthday was the next day. She's like, let me come over. I'll cook you pasta. And I was like, okay. And he goes, and just so you know, I'll have to warn you, Dad's going to be there. And I'm like, oh no, terrible. So I go over there, and Mel's at this time 96, I think. And he jumped up in a chair and sang happy birthday to me. And then he found out I was from the South, and he goes, oh my God, I went to Virginia Military Institute. And then he starts singing. He's like, is it true what they say about Dixie? And he's dancing, and he's doing the full Mel Brooks song and dance. 96, crushing it, sharp as a tack. So, like, no, I can't imagine when this album come out, 1960 what?
1960.
That son of a bitch was on fire. There's no way he wasn't.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a guy who, was such a ball of energy that at some point Sid Caesar was so upset with him that he hung him out of a window and was going to kill him. One of my favorite stories of all time.
And that's true that happened, right? Like Sid,
I believe, he admitted it in his biography. He's like, this is a bad move on my part, but I did it.
And that's so crazy, like how much those guys. And I mean, I love Sid Caesar too, but obviously I didn't work with him and I didn't have the adoration that those guys felt about Sid Caesar the way me and you were sitting here talking about Mel Brooks, probably to a larger degree because they actually got to work with him. And I feel like this is how weird Hollywood is sometimes, and how much we just let a lot of stuff go when someone's really talented. Mel probably still talks about him that way, even though he hung him out of a window. He's like, well, the guy, he was, what are you going to do? It's crazy.
He was crazy. He was an alcoholic at the time. There's a lot of stuff going on. All stuff that I think he had to contend with. If I remember correctly, I feel like the story was either Mel had stolen his wallet as a gag, or he thought he had. And then he was basically like, fuck you, I want my wallet back. You do not do this to Sid Caesar, and hung him out a window.
Oh my! And is this just when like Mel's like his head writer?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Mel gets a raise, and he's like, he's not that bad.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
To be fair, at this point, things we know about history, there are a few other people he could have hung out the window, and I would have been okay with it. Just saying.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you? So on this record, well, okay, let's start here with the 2,000-year-old man character. There's just so much to work with. It's like the most, I don't know, there's just so much in there. It is just such not an easy premise, but a premise rife with possibilities. What's your favorite part? What's your favorite element of that character?
Well, it's not that easy to get to it. I think it's one of those things where, like, once you have it, it's like, oh my God, it's such a great joke bucket. Like a guy like Mel Brooks, you're the 2,000-year-old man. Go out there, have a good time with it. My favorite part was the oh my God, what was the thing with his ex, with how many wives he'd had? He'd had like 300 or 400 something wives, and he goes, how many? God dang it! He's like, you had 300 and something ex-wives. He goes, yeah. Do you have anything to say about him? He's like, I really only remember one of them. She was something else. They go, it was which one? The third one. I don't know why, but just the third one cracked me up. Like, he didn't say her name, just the third one. That really, 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 really cracked me up. And I love the breaking of the fourth wall within the bit of where you can tell he gets lost with what age he's actually talking about. Then he's talking about Joan of Arc, and she's like, she's like, I'm gonna go save France. I'm like, well, you do that. I'm gonna go take a bath. Like, it's all just classic Mel Brooks, that taking this grandiose idea, but then giving it the tiny slice of life treatment. He was just so good at that.
It's this gutsy premise where, like, I do sketch comedy too, and one of my favorite things to do is to just fuck with history. It's a classic thing to be able to take a piece of history, but he has the balls to be like, no, basically all of recorded human history, that's what I'm working with.
Whole thing, everything.
So then Carl Reiner can ask him about anything. Robin Hood. Did you know Robin Hood? Yeah, he stole from everybody and he kept everything.
He kept everything. Yay, prance through the forest.
But because of Marty the press agent, he had good press, so that's why we remember him so well. Marty the press agent.
Absolutely tremendous stuff.
Now this is one of those weird things that I feel like if you had picked this without having heard the record, you probably would have been like, I had no idea that there are these other characters. Because when I first heard these records, I was like, I assumed they'd just be the 2,000-year-old man the whole time.
I definitely probably did too.
Do you have any particular favorites among the rest of them?
Do you have him in your note? Can you list them all?
Yes, absolutely. So the next one is Fabiola, who was
great.
A rock and roller, an astronaut.
Yeah.
And at the coffee house, there's a depressed guy, an actor. Actually, the depressed one. It is actually a woman. The actor, the painter, the folk singer, the Peruvian, and the psychiatrist.
I certainly enjoyed the actor. I enjoyed what Mel did with all of that. I like that he was, and I mean we constantly play around with that. Oh, I'm a crazy eccentric actor trope, but I mean this is in the '60s. He's sort of kind of inventing the form there, and I really really enjoyed that. Yeah. I enjoyed the whole thing. I enjoy how similar they are. It's not like Mel Brooks has so much range yet doesn't have any range. I can't say that without that sounding like an insult, but it's not. But Mel is like, I don't have to put on a completely different voice or a completely different. Look, I say I'm this. You all believe me. Who cares? And I just love that.
The accents fall off here and there.
Yeah, of course they do.
Except for, and I think my favorite bit is the Peruvian, which I had forgotten the bit again until we got halfway through it. Well, actually, until you get it right in the beginning, you find out he's in Argentina and he's supposed to be a native. Native. And then he's just like blurting out, like doing the most obvious Nazi references. And
that's a thing that never gets old with me with Mel Brooks is just how much joy you could tell he took in taking the piss out of Hitler and the Nazis, like it was his job, which it was, and I enjoyed that.
I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like people, if you've heard him talk about it, you can tell that's his life's work. That is very much like, well, no, I'm not going to stop people. If nothing else, turn him into an historical joke. It doesn't make you take him any less seriously, but it does certainly make you not. It makes you, hate him more. I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also like it goes against the grain of how some people talk nowadays. Like we'll say, for instance, maybe my father, who is like, oh yeah, comedy was better when I was a kid when it wasn't political and they didn't get into all this yada yada. I'm like, oh really, Dad? Who's one of your favorite comedians? Mel Brooks, that guy. He never got into that territory. I'm like, famously blazed a trail, as a lot of people would say.
Yeah, Hitler on Ice.
My God, that's History of the World. Is that History of the World Part 1?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
Oh, it's so fucking good. I need to rewatch that. We discussed the record, which is like, have you ever listened to any of the records of the movies? Because they mix soundtrack, like music and dialogue.
No, I have not.
Oh, they're very good. They're a lot of fun. The Blazing Saddles one, I've never heard because the original is way too rare. They've recently released a soundtrack of the movie, which I don't own on vinyl because I can't find it. But the original one is like impossible to find, and I don't know if it's the same or not.
So do you mean they would it would be the songs from the movie and then every now and then there would just be like little clips of the actual dialogue from the movie?
Pretty lengthy clips, yeah.
Oh, that's tremendous.
So you get a rough idea what the movie is.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, I've never in my life heard that. I've got some movie soundtracks, but like Robin Hood.
Sure.
Like Roger Miller stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did, at least with Young Frankenstein and with History of the World, he did that. And the one guy interviewed was like, oh, I'd heard the record before I'd ever seen History of the World, so I like the record more because that's what I grew up with.
That is such a bizarre concept to me. Mm-hmm. That is...
Same.
I like, I'm familiar with the books better than the movie, but I've never been familiar with, I like the record more than the movie. Like that's
I will say, I'm that way with Monty Python. I like the records more than the show, much as I love the show.
Is it because you think visually it doesn't hold up so much that kind of takes away your enjoyment?
There's a big part, if not take away my enjoyment, it's just that the audio of the albums is so fucking rich by comparison to how cheap the show looks. It's like there's just so much more work is put into it, and I know there was. And if people aren't aware of this, if I haven't harped on about this enough, I've interviewed the guy who produced most of their records, who started with them when he was 17. Which
Really?
says a lot for his power as a producer, but yeah.
Jesus Christ, Lord! I just found out the other day that George Harrison produced the movies.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's that. Because I've been wanting to revisit the Holy Grail, but I'm always worried when I go back and look at some. I'm like, you just keep it the way it's like. I feel like that's why it's like with certain family members. I'm like, closed casket. Let's just remember them the way that they were. Not after the Bobcat incident. Let's just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now I want to go get the freaking records.
Yeah.
That sounds tremendous.
And
is that like a whole subculture of people that collect the comedy movie album?
I mean, there might be. There's not enough of them out there, I don't think, to make it a thing. I'm trying to think, and I need to look up and see if the Blazing Saddles thing has it, because I have the single of I'm So Tired. I have the 45 of that. But I don't have the full. I've never been able to find the soundtrack for cheap.
I know we came on here to talk about the record, but is there anyone funnier than Madeline Kahn in almost anything? God,
no,
dude.
No. If you don't fall in love with her immediately, then I don't know what to say.
No, I agree.
Phenomenal.
Like, I think if I had a genie and they're like, you could be with one woman from any moment in time, I would be like, Madeline Kahn, circa Blazing Saddles, send me back there right now, do a Thanos snap, whatever you got to do. I'm in. That's who it is. She's gorgeous. She's funny. I love her.
Yeah. No, she's a god. I mean, there's no getting around it. And that I was at least happy that if I can't get anything else on vinyl, that I have that song, because it's so fucking funny.
Oh, it's great.
She's a genius. I need to find an excuse to talk about her for an entire hour on this podcast before we shut the whole thing down.
Hey, let me ask you this question about about this album, because I don't know. Was this a thing that Mel and Carl did on stage, like in and around LA when they were working on other things, or were they on the road touring with this?
To the best of my knowledge, and I apologize because I'm not the expert people often assume I am, but it was a party thing. They legitimately performed it at parties. And then I think I should look this up. But it started out as a party thing, a lot like, I've heard mixed reports about whether or not that's true about Bob Newhart, but sort of the same kind of thing. Hey, we perform for our funny friends, and some of them are rich, and they said, hey, you should go make a record, or you should go perform this live,
Yeah, that happened a crazy amount back then. I was actually just, we were talking about Jerry Clower, who is a Southern humorist comedian. Mm-hmm. Have you talked about any of his albums on here?
We have. It was a weird session because I didn't know what to make of it.
That's tremendous. It's funny. I almost, when I picked Mel Brooks, but I thought maybe I should go with Jerry Clower because it's more reflective of my region. Mel Brooks is more reflective of probably my personality and who I actually feel who I lie to myself in the mirror and say, this is the type of comedian you are. But really, it's Jerry Clower and a bucket of chicken. But Jerry Clower, it was like what you said, like his early records was literally, he was a fertilizer salesman. And, he would just be at these Tractor Supply type places. And this guy came up to him one time. He's like, hey, by the way, I just recorded everything that you did, your whole little speech here. He's like, okay. And he goes, can I make a record out of that? And he's like, do whatever you want. I don't care. And that went platinum. Like, what a great time to be breaking into something.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was, and his whole career launched from being a man who could literally sell shit. I mean, that is a perfect beginning to a weird, I hesitate to even call it comedy. It's very niche.
Right, yeah, for sure.
Or is it because maybe I'm talking as a very not Southern gentleman?
Well, it could be that. I mean, it definitely could be that. I watched one of his his like later like specials. It was like, live from Gatlinburg or whatever. And like he had in some of them, it's like, okay, that's a good story, but it definitely wasn't set up. There's no set up punch. And then sometimes he would just be talking for like 8 minutes and it was just, he's just trying to tell us not to do drugs. That wasn't funny at all. He's just like, I know that comedians constantly give you their opinion, but like there's always like, a fart joke included with it or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I think that I would say he was a humorist and a storyteller. I would put him in that category.
He's a weird, and he, by the way, also one of the other things is he's one of the most prolific comedy album creators I've ever seen.
Oh yeah,
I think at least 20, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
and that's pretty nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's especially considering how relatively short his comedy career was, his
For
performing
sure.
career.
And also just the way back, like comedy nowadays, it's like, well, you better have 20 specials because you have to put out one every year. But like back then, people didn't do that. People kind of, you just toured on your act, and like, they were like, no, I would never put it on record and send it out. Then I can't do it anymore, you know? So like, that is pretty insane.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in this, the Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner just being at parties. I'm interested in that period where people were just like wearing suits, drinking martinis in people's living rooms, doing a 2,000-year-old man sketch. Can you imagine being at that party?
No, I can't. Oh, and here, okay, so I'm seeing a note here that does say numerous people, such as George Burns, suggested to the two that they put their material on an album, and only Steve Allen managed to coax the two to come record it in his studio. And so that's how it doesn't tell me a whole bunch about the touring, but at least it was definitely a record thing. My guess is they would just like get together, sell a bunch of fucking tickets, and we're like, hey, we're doing another record. You guys want to be here for the audience? And I mean, must have been hit.
That's another thing that's so crazy about that is like how polished and veteran these dudes sound in this to me. Yeah. And it's like, oh, this is their very, 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 very early work. Like very early work. Dude, my very early work, I have like paid people to scrub from the internet. Like been like, please don't let anyone get a hold of any of my early work. Like even stuff that like I was like 7 years in the game, I look back on now. Granted, it was an age thing. Like I started when I was 16, so you have to understand anything in the first 8 years, I hate that guy. Like he's stupid and young and but like, yeah, these guys are just, I don't know. Like he genuinely does. Mel Brooks in here convinces me that he's the 2,000-year-old man, and he's like 25 years old.
He's so young. He's so
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like but he's never not sounded like Mel Brooks. It's crazy. He's just got this. He's got this just air of wisdom about him that even comes through in audio. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah. I feel like we're dancing around the fact that he sang it to you your birthday and how much I hate you for that. I'm kidding. I do not hate you. I do not hate you, but I'm so jealous.
Dude, listen, man, I got to tell you, like I did tell people when that happened, I was like, there's nowhere to go from here. I mean, he literally is my number one idol. And getting to do that and getting to stay in touch with the family has been pretty Oh, and I'll tell you what, and God rest Carl Reiner's soul. That's actually, so, you know, they famously have had like dinner together every night for like 50 years. That's why he left. We were eating for my birthday and he didn't eat because he just sat there with us and hung out. And then he goes, all right, well, happy birthday. It was good to see you, but I got to go to Carl's house. And he walked over to Carl Reiner's house. Like my birthday was his first stop, and then he went to see Carl Reiner.
That's so fucking good.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's the best moment of my entire life. I got a photographic evidence of it that, yeah, pretty good stuff. I think it's up here somewhere. It's somewhere in this room.
So good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know we're gonna go around a bit because I think we're just gonna have to talk about Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner.
That's fine.
That's fine with me. Do you? Oh, actually, first, like, what's your level of? And feel free, because I don't have a whole lot. What's your level of knowledge on like your show of shows? Because there's not a lot out there to be able to watch. But like the Sid Caesar show, have you seen much of it?
Just in clips, like
Same.
on documentaries and stuff like that. Cliff Nesterhoff? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've never said it out loud. I've only read it, but I've read the comedians like 3 times, and so I have all of Cliff's knowledge of Sid Caesar that he put in those pages.
Okay,
I possess I don't know what I've retained, what I could fire off right now, but I read. Sure. I was very interested in that era of television, but like I haven't seen enough. You know?
No, same. It's harder to get a hold of. Also, it's just
for sure.
Physically, it's
they didn't preserve shit back then.
No, and when they tried, you know, they were kinescopes were literally shot off of a fucking TV screen. So it's film shot off of a TV screen, and the only reason we know who Lucille Ball still is because she got her way, and they shot all their shows on film. So that's
God, and thank God for that. Like that's such a in retrospect like super sad thing. Like Now me, like because we live in the world now where you have to go out of your way for something not to be permanent.
Oh, for sure.
You know, like if you want something not to be permanent, you got to have NDAs. You got to be in a sealed off location. You got to everybody has to put their phones in a bag that you zip up and lock. But because I'm very happy that there were not cell phones when I first started doing stand up, because there would be some jokes out there and me and you would not be talking right now.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah.
But man, it's such a tragedy that you hear about all these things and you're like that they did, and you're like, we will never see that.
Yeah.
And that's such a hard. I don't know about you, but whenever I decide I'm going to watch this movie tonight, and then I go and it's not on any of the streaming services, and I'm like, well, that's okay. I'll just buy it on Amazon, and somehow randomly it's not available on Amazon and I'm not able to get it. The amount of fury that goes through my body, because I've been conditioned to live in a world where if you want to see something, you just clickety, enter, boom, there it is. So yeah, that really sucks that we can't see a lot of the show of shows.
Yeah, I mean, it was that way for a while. I realize I still have my news radio background up. It was that way for a while.
I love that. Yeah, I thought I saw Phil Hartman back there.
Yeah. It is my favorite TV show of all time. The same as where I always keep Blazing Saddles there for movies. News radio is always there for TV. So for a long time.
Every time it's on, I always watch it. But is there anybody streaming it right now? Is there?
You can buy it on Amazon. You can stream it 2 seasons at a time through Crackle, because Crackle is shit because Sony doesn't know what they're doing. That's why I just bought the DVDs and ripped them all and just took the time to rip them so that I can just watch them at home. It's just the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, that's true. You got very excited there, by the way. That's how I know that's your favorite show, because can I stream it anywhere? You're, oh, God, let me tell you exactly where. You can get it on Amazon, and I suggest you do, but
this is, you can't see it. You can't see it. That's a season 3 crew sweatshirt, because I now know basically everybody who's involved with that show, because I'm obsessed. It's one of those, like.
So you got a crew jacket from somebody?
I do. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I also. Well, do you like that show? Have you seen that show enough?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Not like.
It's
not
okay.
Not enough.
Sure.
I haven't seen enough, but it's one of those that here's my relationship with news radio.
Yes.
Every time it's on TV, I go, oh yeah, and then 5 minutes in, I go, why don't I watch this more?
Right.
Like Phil Hartman's really good, Joe Rogan's really good, Andy Dick's really everybody on there is really, really, really good.
I can't shut up about this, so I'm just going to tell you very quickly what's back here. All of Phil Hartman's costumes were destroyed or given away, because after he died, the studio was like, no, you can't sell these, based off of some macabre, gross people buying them because he's dead, and then selling them for a mint. So they were all destroyed. And then I talked to the lady who had gotten rid of them. She's like, oh, so oops, I accidentally have one thing left. And I have it. It's his suit from this space episode where it was a whole space station. I don't know if you can you? No, you can't really see it if I lift. No, oh, there it is.
There's a space
suit right back there. So that's, again, I'm never going to get a prop from Blazing Saddles. So at least I'm going to obsess over my favorite TV show of all time.
Dude, that's pretty. Dude, having something of Phil Hartman's is pretty rad. Yeah, that's one of them guys that he amongst my generation. We saw the tail end of him. I mean, when he died, like we were watching Saturday Night Live. We were glued in because that was the Farley years and yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
But I think that he's one that Farley's always going to be remembered as this big, boisterous dude. And obviously Sandler did the song for him, which I got a great story about that. I got a great Adam Sandler story. But Phil Hartman's one of those guys that was almost like so good that he goes under the radar.
Yeah.
And then but then every time you watch an old sketch with him, you're like, Jesus Christ, he was born to do Sinatra. Amazing.
Yeah.
Just absolutely amazing stuff.
Have you ever seen, because I think this is on the Blu-ray in every version of the DVD. Have you seen the pilot of the Blazing Saddles TV show?
No, I didn't even. What? You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah. Starred, I don't want to get this wrong. If I'm not mistaken, it was Lou Gossett Jr. Give me 1 second so I don't get it. Was called it was called Black Bart.
Okay. I feel like I have to turn in revoke my fandom or something. I didn't even know this was a thing.
Well, because the show's not good. Now, what I've recently heard is and I don't know if this is true. This could be completely apocryphal. It's complete bullshit. But what was passed to me was that not only was there a pilot, but there was some deal where Mel Brooks, basically they said after a certain period, we get to spin this off into whatever properties we want, Mel, because we own it, and unless something else is developed. And supposedly they shot rapid fire 2 seasons of the show, and those 2 seasons they're just banked somewhere. So
wouldn't you love it?
Even if it's shit, I want to see it.
Yeah, of course I want to see it. But like, and that's funny because I almost just said something that in hindsight is really stupid. I almost said, was that for network? And it's like, of course it was. That's all there was back then was network. Right. But like, yeah, the idea of anybody that worked in television at the time, seeing Blazing Saddles and thinking to themselves, this can follow Rifleman, or something like, we could adapt this for a place that completely and solely relies on Kraft macaroni and cheese dinner sponsoring us for an entire hour. Like, that's so insane and hilarious to hear.
And like, I don't need to hear these certain words to get the point across that racism is bad, but whatever alternative they come up with for TV for 2 seasons worth is like, this would have been insulting.
Yeah, because that's another thing with it too. You go, it's also insulting that you're acting like they wouldn't say it. Don't let them off them off the hook. That was like one of my main arguments to somebody when they were talking about Django. They were like, I mean, my God, it's every other word. And I'm like, well, they were slavers. So I don't know. What do you think Don Johnson would have said? Because I got to tell you, if he doesn't say it, in my opinion, they're kind of acting like this dude's a little bit better than he was. Like, that's 100%. Leonardo DiCaprio can pay him $50 to beat each other to death, but he's not going to say that. All right, come on now.
Yeah.
But like, yeah. No, you're right though.
Do you okay, I guess let's get back to the record. I just can't stop.
Oh yeah, my bad. We got off the rails.
No, it's not your bad. I did it. I did it to us.
And I can't stop talking about Blazing Saddles either. So don't look to me to steer the ship.
Okay, who's your favorite character in Blazing Saddles?
I mean, probably.
I know it's a rough question.
It's a rough question because it might be Headley.
I played him on stage once.
Really?
Yeah.
God, that guy was something else.
Holy fuck, man.
Harvey Korman.
Mm-hmm.
What a fella. I think about him all the time. That was such a huge part of my childhood, was sitting in my grandmother's living room floor watching Carol Burnett show and Harvey Korman. And this probably would have been before I saw Blazing Saddles. So when I saw Blazing Saddles, I was like, there's, yada, yada. Probably Headley. I mean, look, every single person in the movie smashes. Not one person doesn't smash. Slim Pickens is great. And especially because he wasn't really an actor. Like, he really was just like a ranch hand guy. And I remember when I was a kid and I heard that, I was like, okay, whatever. And, because I didn't have the capability of understanding what acting was. No idea.
Yeah.
And then I get older and I don't at all consider myself an actor, but I do act in things poorly. But because of that, and because I know how difficult it is, I go, what? That guy he's unnatural. He's a comedic titan. I mean, you got to count Mel Brooks like 3 times in the movie, because William J. LePetame, I mean, my God, that one scene when he's just sitting there bouncing, they do the one shot. Hey boys, good to see you. It's been like, I mean, it's truly unreal. I
gave you an impossible question.
You did give me an impossible. I think you count the entire town as a character.
Oh yeah.
And my goodness, God, they murdered. Then of course Madeline Kahn. How am I going to take anything away from her? Yeah. Okay, final answer. I'm going to say William J. LePetame.
That's perfect. Perfect choice. Oh, there's so much good there.
Or the old lady that just randomly calls Bart the N-word.
And he takes it in stride because of course he does.
Yeah, well, she did have a pie.
I love so much that it's great. You never know. Okay, you ever listen to the commentary on any Mel Brooks movie?
No, actually, I can't say that I have.
Worth listening to. And then number 2, I love listening to it and then listening to him retell a story with slightly different details later. And it's not because his memory's failing. It's because he's a bullshit artist. And I love it.
It's funny that you say that, because my dad has seen Mel Brooks twice live, specifically on a Blazing Saddles tour, where basically the whole gimmick is everyone watches the movie and then he gets up and he does this thing and answers questions or whatever. Which, like, dude, I hope that's the career I want, is to have one movie so iconic that I can just tour, watch people enjoy my movie, and then answer questions about the thing that they just watched. That's the gig. That's the gig of all gigs. But Dad said he's like, I was sitting there listening. I'm like, I remembered the answers from the first time, and he's just like, and I'm like, yeah, he's like, hey, the guy's just up there, just like, it's like, hey, I want to. It's a new show, you know. What are you gonna do? So that's tremendous.
It's so good every time. And that's why I'm like, I don't know if any of these stories are true, which is why I like to go to the other people. Like if Gene Wilder tells a story, because he's just got such pure heart, I believe every word he tells me.
Right, exactly. And I do too.
It's impossible not to.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, it's like, oh, Mel yelled at me once and it was because of this. And it's like, oh, poor Gene. It's fine. I still love Mel, but poor little Gene. Because there are not rumors, but at least the way Mel Brooks has said it, he's gotten this right a few times. He said it the same way a few times, was that originally it was supposed to be, I think, Gig Young, or, also Pryor was also supposed to play Black Bart, but Gene Wilder's part was supposed to be Gig Young or somebody else, and basically was just puking all over the set, and they said, hey, Gene, do you want to do another movie?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure.
Do you want to come in here and murder this? Yeah, I've heard that too, that he came in like very, very, very last minute. Mm-hmm. Like legit last minute, like maybe a couple days notice.
Right.
And then there was like the two competing stories, which was, there's the one you hear Richard Pryor tell, which was, we wrote this character and it was going to be so important to the film, and I was getting so famous that if I was to play the role, people would only see Richard Pryor, but if Cleavon Little plays it, then they can actually enjoy the character. And then there's the other side where people go, no, we couldn't fucking get insurance on Richard Pryor is the whole problem. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I know which one I want to believe.
Yeah, sure.
Like I really want to believe this artistic Richard Pryor sacrificed screen time for the character, but like, I mean, I know what I believe.
And also, I mean, no offense to Richard Pryor, he's a good-looking man. There's almost nobody better looking than Cleavon Little in the history of movies. He's
for sure
too much of a stud. So
yeah, absolutely adorable. I genuinely don't think that. And maybe I'm short selling Richard Pryor's acting ability, but I don't know that Richard Pryor could have pulled off the charm and innocence yet stoicness that Cleavon Little did when he's riding in. Like, and maybe it's just because Richard Pryor's so goddamn funny to me. Sure. I'd just be like, that's just Richard Pryor. He's just being goofy and funny, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is something we normally delve in earlier in the podcast. This is us being on the rails, by the way.
Oh, cool.
I know. Did you have comedy albums growing up in the house? Is that something that you were exposed to?
Yeah, a lot of CDs. When I was a kid, my dad was and still is in advertising, and so when I was a kid, he was constantly going down to the radio stations and selling his ads or buying time or whatever it is that they do. And because of that, he met a ton of comedians from the local comedy club, which was the Comedy Catch. They would be coming in to do morning radio at the time my dad was coming in to have a meeting.
Oh, wow.
And he would talk to these guys, and they were always nice and hungover and giving dad albums and stuff like that. And there was this one particular dude, Tim Wilson, God rest his soul. And dad had all of his albums, and he was this great country comedian, and I listened to all of them when I was a kid. And that's kind of what made me, I knew at like 5 I wanted to do comedy of some kind. I thought I thought maybe Saturday Night Live. I'd seen dad laugh at stand-up comedians, so I was like, well, maybe that, but I didn't really know the difference I was like, funny on TV, that's what I want to do.
Sure.
And then listening to Tim Wilson CDs as a kid, I was like, nope, I want to do exact, because I saw like specifically how dad laughed at it.
Okay.
And I was like, I got to do that. I saw those CDs get my dad through the worst time of his life, and I was like, oh, that's something there. Like as a kid, I could connect the two. I was like, he hasn't smiled in a long time, and he smiled. So then I ended up, then Tim was the first show that I ever saw. I snuck into the comedy club when I was 15 and my buddy was 17. We snuck in, see Tim, and my buddy was like, we see him, and it's like, the live it's a whole different beast. And we're like, oh, Jesus, God, this place is on there. It's alive. Like there's an energy. And my buddy was like, man, you ain't ever going to be that good. And I was like, no, you're right. I'm not, you're right. But I'll have to try. And the next year I started doing open mics. And then 8 years later, I opened for Tim.
Wow.
And yep. And so yes, we did. We were my family's very fun. There's 4 members. There's my mom, my dad, my sister, and me, and I'm the 4th funniest. I'm just the one that decided I'll do this, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, don't you hate when that's the case? Where it's like, at the very least, doesn't matter how successful I am or how funny I think I am, I know that they can lord themselves over me. I know
Of
how that
course.
feels. I know
Oh,
how that feels.
absolutely. And everybody that ever meets them, they're like, "Oh, you were the comedian," and I'm like, "I know. They're way funnier than me. They just they don't need
Yeah,
the attention."
yeah. That's the difference. You got to put ego on top of all the skill that they've got, and then I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah, for sure. I can tell.
Do you have anything? Did you have anything older than? And it's great that you had a ton of contemporary stuff, but was there anything older sitting around or no?
I mean, if you want to count like the Roy Clark, Grandpa Jones hee haw stuff, then yeah, I mean,
Yep.
we had a lot. We had a lot
Okay.
of that. My granny was, I mean, that was her bag, and over there at my granny's house, it was vinyl,
Okay.
and stuff. But she was a Grand Ole Opry, hee haw, Ralph Emery Show, like all that good stuff. So yeah,
Sure.
there was definitely some. There was some Grandpa Jones albums. There was some. What was the fat feller in the overalls? Do you remember? Junior samples.
There we go.
Thank
you.
There
Yeah.
was junior sample stuff, and yeah, there was like that stuff. No, like actual like what I would call a stand up Minnie Pearl.
Sure.
And Minnie Pearl, I would count her as a stand up comedian of her time. Like it wasn't really wasn't as big as it is now. Like if she was doing what she was doing then, now we would be like, that's what you call them. So we had a little bit of that. Like everybody had a sense of humor.
Yeah. Do you? Is there? There's got to be. I'm assuming there's this weird thing where Southern comics and Southern comedy get relegated to its own genre, as though an accent should make it a genre.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there are like some underexposed Southern comics or acts that I might not know about that pop off the top of your head.
Yeah, Stuart Huff, Dale Jones, those are definitely the two big ones for me. Those guys they're both from Kentucky. Now, it's funny you say that because like you're right, it is like but it's not called Southern comedy. Usually, it's called blue collar comedy, which is weird. But it insinuates that if you have a Southern accent, then you must be blue collar.
Yeah.
And for the record, I have no shame in that at all.
Sure.
Like none whatsoever. But blue collar means, they're going to be talking about, my wife this and my car broke down. And so there's no room in that for what that genre is to talk about anything more elevated. And then as soon as you're a Southern comic that does start talking about anything more elevated, all of a sudden they go, oh, you're not really from the South. And it's like, yes, I am. Yes, I am. You can't just hear me breaking down Henry VIII's divorce proceedings and think if that's the subject matter he's talking about, then this isn't classified as Southern humor because I'm as country as cornbread. It's just I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
And Dale and Stewart are two dudes who they're not gonna like subject matter wise, you're not thinking Larry the Cable Guy, but their accents there, country is cornbread, and those are two dudes. And I don't know, there was that moment I think like the South exploded with Jeff Foxworthy and Larry and Bill and Ron and all this, and like, dude, I got nothing but respect for those guys. And like, I mean, Jesus God, like me and the dudes I tour with, like we unabashedly and unashamedly, like we based our modeling tour on the blue collar comedy tour.
Okay, yeah.
Just it's like, well, all right, it's three dudes, and at the end they'll go back up and they'll talk and they'll do stand up and Bob's your uncle, there it is. We love those dudes, but I think that they got so big that now they're like, oh, you got a Southern accent, Larry the Cable Guy, or you're Jeff Foxworthy, and it's like I don't know, that's weird. I just never thought of like, oh, your New York accent, you're a comedian, you know what I mean? You're funny, I don't care.
Yeah. Well, and also if people do the basic fucking math, where I'm from, upstate New York, we basically have Southern accents. I've just pushed it out of my fucking mouth,
Oh, upstate New York, I consider them very much rednecks. Because rednecks, what people don't understand, that's not Southern exclusive. You know what I mean?
No,
That's rednecks is a way of life, and really, it's our country is not really as north versus south as everybody thinks it is. It's really more rural versus city. And I say that because I have more in common often with someone from Washington State, which is, 36 hours away from me, than I'll have with someone from Atlanta, Georgia, which is an hour and 30 minutes away from me, because they grew up in the city. And nothing, ain't nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But they grew up in the city. I grew up in a rural area, and the dude in Washington State grew up in a rural area. Me and him, accents are different, but we're speaking the same language.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I know that when he says, hey, man, I got to go to mama's house, that he has to go. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know these things.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But with me, like, I know it sounds like I'm complaining about it, but realistically, I like it because it's a secret weapon. Because when you're Southern and you don't go up there and go, if you might be a redneck, which again, some of the greatest jokes of all time were from that format. But people get really confused at what I am, and it sort of helps put butts in the seats, just me being different. So
right,
I like it.
Of course. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It is. It's not a gimmick if you fuck with the expectation. You know what I'm saying? Like if you were leaning into what people expected of you, well then yeah, sure, that's a gimmick, and that's not
right.
But you've got your own act, you've got your own personality.
Yeah, and it's fine if you call it a gimmick. I don't care.
Yeah, but
I'm a wrestling fan, so I throw the word gimmick out a lot, and not as an offense. So I got it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, because when I think of gimmick as the whole package rather than the thing that gets the butt in the seat. But maybe not. Maybe that is the thing that gets the butt in the seat, and the rest of it is you selling it. You doing the thing.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah,
all right, that's a fair way. Yeah, I'm always like trying to reassess how I look at comedic and showbiz terminology, like novelty records and stuff.
Oh, sure.
That becomes a pejorative, which it shouldn't, because that's
interesting.
A career out of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. Novelty record. I could see that being like, I would never in a million years say that as an offense, but I could see somebody being like, oh no, because there's little words like that trigger me, that people aren't that say, and they're like one of them for me that I can't, that they're like, oh, you're a content creator. Fuck.
No, thank you. No, thank you. I'd rather jump out a window than hear that again.
Me too. I can't. And I know that they don't know any better.
Sure.
And I'm like, but the word content just implies that it's anything. Like this is content. The contents of my desk. There's an old cucumber on it. Like, I can't stand you're a content creator, but I know that some of the people that are saying that it's of no offense.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, it gripes me.
Should we go back to the record for a minute?
Sure, we can. I'm sorry.
I didn't. No, I
didn't mean to do this.
I did this. This is what I did on purpose, because I also realized, like, I took a bunch of notes, but do you have a favorite bit on here that isn't the 2,000-year-old man?
It would I think probably
you said you like the actor.
The actor, yeah, I like the actor. But I mean, 2,000-year-old man. Like, it actually kind of surprised me, the positioning of the 2,000-year-old man in the album. Like, you would think that they'd close with it.
Right,
right. It's the strongest, and it's the name of the album. Now, granted, I could see them being like, well, yeah, it's the name of the album, so we better have it there first so that people don't hear, 15 minutes of not that and then go, what is this? I don't understand.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting decision. But I mean, no, obviously it's the 2,000-year-old man far and away. I would love to. And they did if I'm not mistaken, like not that long ago, they did another 2,000-year-old man, correct?
Yeah, I mean, not that long ago in terms of they did it 21 years ago now, which depresses me. But yeah,
that's actually
2000. Yeah.
That's actually, to me, 2000 is not that long ago. And boy, you're right, it is.
It is, right?
Them kids are drinking like madmen right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, when I bought that the second I found out it existed, and like it took me a while. I was like, I don't know if this is as good. And then it took a few years because literally a couple references made more sense, and then a couple. Then I got also a little less picky, and I was like, no, this is a good album. It's not as good as the original, because it will never be as good as these other ones. But it was still great listening to these then 70-year-old guys fucking off for an hour. It's great.
Just being buddies. Yeah, it's tremendous. I rewatched their episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee every now and then just to make myself feel. I'm like, because as how terrible and backstabby Hollywood is, like just look at them go. Just look at them go. That's what it's all about right there. If you get one person like that in this world, that's tremendous.
When I was a kid, I wanted nothing more than to be an old Jewish man, and so whenever I watched those things,
Me too.
Yeah, that was always my dream. I was just like, I didn't quite know what it meant to be Jewish. I was just like, I love how Yiddish sounds.
Yeah,
everybody who's funny to me is Jewish.
Me
so
too.
I guess I need to be Jewish.
That's so funny that you say that. When I was a kid, and Jeff Foxworthy was the first time I realized that someone like me could be a stand-up comedian.
Wow,
because I'd never heard my accent really doing that. Because I literally thought I would watch the Tonight Show with my dad, and every time they would bring him out, or Johnny before, I barely remember Johnny, but it would be like from the Comedy Cellar in New York, or from the or from the Comedy Store in Los Angeles. There was the only place they ever introduced comedians from, and I'm like, oh well, that's where they make those, And then getting a little older, and I find out that like so many of the ones that I liked as a kid and my dad liked were Jewish. That's all I knew what Jewish meant when I was a kid. To me, all Jewish meant was the group of funny old dudes.
Absolutely.
Like that's just what those guys are. They're the funny old dudes. That's what a Jewish person is.
Yep.
And then I found out it was a lot more complicated. Still funny.
Yeah.
Still very funny. On it, arguably funnier considering.
You sure? Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was like, I feel like up until I got a little bit older, I was like, oh, okay, it's a little more complicated, but still.
Yeah.
Still haven't let go of that dream.
Yeah, right.
One of these days.
One of these days.
Okay, here's the problem: is I could talk to you for hours. So let's cut this off and tell people why to listen to this record. Give me a couple sentences of why. Let's say somebody only knows, them from some other project. They only know Blazing Saddles.
If you want to hear two people who are genuine comedic titans and legends who are having a blast and it comes through, this is the record that you need to listen to. This is a perfect combination of what I know is well-written jokes from two of the greatest writers of their generation and any generation, but also playful banter. You can tell when they're in the pocket, like jazz performers to comedy. It is a masterpiece.
Absolutely. That's perfect. Now,
I'm really proud of myself for that. That was
succinct. Good. Beautifully. No, absolutely. I asked that question every week, and I'm like, oh, that's better put than I could have done it. I would have fucking destroyed it. It would have been horrible. Okay, so I got to cut this part out because I don't know. Is there any urgency on me releasing this? Or
no, not at all.
Okay, so then I will just say, so this episode
you're going to save it for when Mel Brooks dies, aren't you? I know what you're going to
do. This is coming out on June. I will tell you, it's happened before. It makes me so upset when that happens. I'll interview somebody about somebody so obscure to me.
Yeah.
I had Rhys Darby on, and we talked about this New Zealand/Australian comic who is hilarious and so funny. A week later, he dies, and I'm like,
oh my god.
I was like, okay, well,
you got to put that out.
Exactly. This is going to come out on June 2nd.
Cool.
So why don't you tell people where they can find you and if anything's coming up that they should keep an eye out for?
You can find me. It's real easy. I got everything up at CoreyRyanForrester.com. And I have, you can go to check out my podcast, the Well Read Podcast, Through the Screen Door. And I think by this time, my new podcast, Putting on Airs, with Trey Crowder and Corey Ryan Forrester will be out, and it is it's a podcast. Putting on Airs. If you're from the South, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That is two rednecks talking about fancy, often British stuff. The first couple episodes, I broke down Henry VIII, Marie Antoinette. We talked about wine. We've talked about the period of time in Britannia when they were obsessed with mummies. And so it's just a super silly podcast that relies on the juxtaposition of fancy stuff and rednecks kind of bucking up against each other. So
I've never wanted to hear a podcast more in my life.
It's real fun.
Holy shit. That's remarkable. My mom is like a big she's obsessed with Henry VIII. Like she could challenge any historian on it. Like
I believe it. Well, I'll debate your mom.
I'm just going to send that to her. I'm going to send her. She's going to want to listen to it. That's fucking great. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so please. So you also have a podcast problem. I get it. I get it.
I sure do.
A lot of shows. That's good though.
Sure do. Yeah. The pandemic, man. What were you gonna do?
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've got anything to promote. Do I? I don't fucking know. Go to StolenDress.com. That's where all my podcasts are. All my movies are. That's where all my books are. That's about it. Thank you, Corey. Again.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on, Jason. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for listening. And as always, have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is a production of StolenDress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Worden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klamm. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. You can email us at podcast@comedyonvinyl.com. You can also send snail mail to StolenDress Entertainment, P.O. Box 805, Burbank, California, 91503. Subscribe to Comedy on Vinyl on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It helps. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Comedy on Vinyl, or find everything in one place at comedyonvinyl.com. A major portion of Comedy on Vinyl has been underwritten by Stand Up Records. Please visit standuprecords.com for all your comedy needs and tune in to the new Stand Up Records channel available on the Roku, where you can also find select episodes of this podcast. Visit StolenDress.com to listen to our other podcasts, watch videos, and imbibe freely of our multimedia content going back 15 plus years. StolenDress Entertainment.
Hey, it's my turn.